He was a grandfather, a retired engineer. In his neighborhood, folks knew him as private but helpful. He lived with his wife, kept to himself, and, well, just seemed ordinary. But beneath his home, hidden behind an electronically sealed door, was a cellar, a secret room, a prison, a life stolen. For 24 years he held his daughter there, locked away from the world, isolated, violated, forgotten. It all began back in 1984 in the small town of Amstetten, Austria. Elisabeth Fritzl was just 18 years old when she vanished. Her parents told the police she had probably run away. They even produced a handwritten letter, supposedly from Elisabeth, saying she had joined a cult. The case was closed, and nobody asked any further questions. But behind the walls of the Fritzl home, the truth was far more horrifying. Elisabeth hadn't run away. She had been trapped by her own father. Years before Elisabeth's disappearance, Josef Fritzl, a trained engineer, started modifying his basement. He applied for permits to build a so-called nuclear shelter. To officials, it was just a precaution. But in reality, he was building a soundproof, windowless maze of chambers, locked behind multiple doors. In August 1984, he lured Elisabeth down into the basement. He asked for her help, carrying a door. When she stepped inside, he gassed her unconscious. And when she woke up, the door was shut, and it wouldn't open again, for 24 years. The room was small, damp, claustrophobic. It had no windows, no sunlight, just a single bed, a hot plate, and a basin. Elisabeth was completely cut off from the world. And then, the abuse began. Fritzl came down nearly every day. He brought food, clean clothes, books. And he raped her, repeatedly. Over time, Elisabeth became pregnant. Not once, not twice, but 7 times. 3 of those children were raised in the cellar with her. 3 were removed from the dungeon, brought upstairs and raised by Fritzl and his wife Rosemary, who claimed the babies had just been left by Elisabeth at their doorstep. 1 child died shortly after birth. Fritzl disposed of the body in an incinerator. For 2 decades, Elisabeth and her underground children lived in darkness. They never saw daylight. They never went outside. They never knew the world above their heads. From the outside, the Fritzl household appeared strange, but not suspicious. Josef Fritzl was controlling. He kept his family quiet. He had a history of domestic violence, but honestly, no one looked that closely. He claimed Elisabeth had joined a cult and, every so often, fabricated letters in her handwriting. He told neighbors she dropped off her babies at night and wanted no contact. Authorities never searched the house. They never checked the basement. Rosemary, his wife, insisted she had no idea what was really happening. And perhaps in her own form of denial, she didn't. But Josef controlled every lock, every schedule, every alibi. He was the architect of a perfect lie. Everything changed in April 2008. One of Elisabeth's children, Kirsten, aged 19, fell gravely ill. Her body was shutting down from lack of sunlight, poor nutrition, and medical neglect. Fritzl realized she might die. He couldn't afford to lose the body like before. So he did something unprecedented. He brought Kirsten to a hospital and told staff she had been left on his doorstep. Doctors were confused. Kirsten's condition was unlike anything they'd seen. She had never been vaccinated, never seen a dentist, never lived in open air. They alerted the authorities. Police made a public plea. Elisabeth, wherever you are, come forward. Your daughter might die. And then, the unthinkable happened. Josef brought Elisabeth, now 42, upstairs. Her first time outside the cellar in 24 years. He instructed her to stick to the story, that she had run away, joined a cult, and was now back to help her daughter. But police separated her from Josef. They interrogated her for hours. And eventually, she broke. She told them everything, that she had never left, that she had been imprisoned, raped, forced to bear children, and held in absolute darkness for most of her adult life. Investigators rushed to the Fritzl home. They found the hidden door, the stairway down, the triple-locked security system, the false wall, and behind it, a world no human being should ever endure. The case shocked the world. Folks just couldn't understand how something so horrific could go undetected for, well, 2 decades. The media dubbed him the monster of Amstetten. In 2009, Josef Fritzl was charged with murder, with a child who died, rape, incest, false imprisonment, and enslavement. He initially pled not guilty, But when Elisabeth appeared in court, when footage of the cellar was played, and when the truth stared him right in the face, he broke down and pled guilty to all charges. He was sentenced to life in prison. He remains there to this day. Elisabeth and her children were taken to a rehabilitation center. They had to learn how to live, how to walk in open spaces, how to handle sunlight, and how to trust people. Kirsten recovered. The family now lives under new identities at a hidden location in Austria. Elisabeth remarkably has rebuilt a life for her children, one of safety, dignity, and freedom. She has spoken little publicly, but those who've worked with her say she is resilient, loving, and determined to protect her family. She's a survivor not just of one man's evil, but of systemic failure, indifference, and decades of silence. On Father's Day, we celebrate guidance, protection, strength, and sacrifice. But what happens when the very person meant to protect becomes the one to fear? Josef Fritzl weaponized fatherhood. He used his authority to isolate, silence, and abuse. He turned love into control and home into a cell. But even in that darkness, Elisabeth held on to hope, to her children, to the belief that someday they'd see the sky. This isn't just a story of horror, it's a story of survival, of the power of a mother and the weakness of a man who could not break her spirit. We tell this story not to sensationalize, but to remember that the worst monsters don't always come with masks. Sometimes they wear the face of a father, and that the strongest heroes aren't always the loudest. Sometimes they're quiet, wounded, but unbroken. Happy Father's Day to those who protect, who love, who show up with gentleness and strength. And to those who didn't have that, may your story end in freedom too. Thank you for watching. Subscribe for more true crime documentaries where human behavior, survival, and justice intersect. Stay aware, stay safe, and never stop asking what lies behind the walls.